EFF leader Julius Malema says he has been denied a visa to London, claiming it's an attack on his dissenting political perspective. Malema has taken to social media claiming British authorities provided no substantial justification for their decision. He was set to attend a conference at Cambridge University.
Julius Malema, leader of South Africa's economic freedom fighters, the EFF, was denied a UK visa just hours before his scheduled departure from OR Tambo International Airport. He was to speak at the Cambridge Africa Together conference, focusing on themes like Western imperialism and African self-determination. Julius, I think, is obviously peeved, or certainly not a very happy man, to say the least, today. His scheduled appearance at the Cambridge Africa Together conference reminded me about another appearance of Julius Malema exactly 10 years ago at the Oxford Union. And because Julius is unable to attend this conference, I thought it might be a nice idea to share some slices of a much younger Julius Malema exactly 10 years ago at the Oxford Union. Let's take a look at this.
Thank you very much, President of the Union, Charlie, our Deputy President, Floyd Shibambo. Rhodes took our land. Rhodes introduced a system that led to a black genocide. Rhodes exploited our minerals and natural resources and left South Africa without anything that will demonstrate that this country is a mineral-rich country. The dogs of rich people in South Africa have got medical aid, but the domestic workers and university workers, the farm workers, the petrol attendants, the security guards do not have medical aids, neither do they have rights as workers.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Malema, for your speech. What would you say is the purpose of your visit to the UK?
Well, the message remains the same, because we shouldn't be tempted to change a message when we speak to different constituencies, because we'll be misleading. The message is economic freedom in our lifetime, in South Africa and the African continent. And that message has been shared yesterday with Africa investors, serious captains of the industry. And one of them was saying to me that the demand to educate everybody will create an environment where everybody is educated and there is no one to provide cheap labor. And as a result, the economy will not survive, because it's the same problem you are confronted with here at UK. And I asked him to not generalize. We need to narrow that point down to our personal experiences. And I said to the chap, one of the captains of the industry, can we agree that we need to provide cheap labor? And you volunteer your child to be one of those people who's not going to go to school and provide that cheap labor. The guy refused immediately. And I said, if your child can't do it, then no child must be allowed a situation where you are denied access to school because you must be one of those who are reserved to provide cheap labor. I think we want to destroy the ANC arrogance. We want to destroy the disrespect of the ANC towards our people. There is no ANC that brought democratic South Africa. It is the people of South Africa who brought a democratic South Africa. Not ANC. In 1994, ANC had less than 500,000 members. Yet the people who voted for the ANC were more than 5 million. So how do you say 500,000 people brought about a democratic South Africa and forget the whole entire millions who brought a democratic South Africa? The ANC was formed in 1912. South Africa existed way before 1912. South Africa existed even before the arrival of Jan van Riebeeck in 1652. So you're telling me about a baby of 1912, that is what made South Africa to be what it is? Not even Jan van Riebeeck can tell me that the arrival of settlers made South Africa to be what it is. They found it there with its beautiful oceans, mountains, and weather. Unlike the weather of UK.
Yeah, exactly. Are there any questions for Mr. Malema from the floor?
Around this time 20 years ago, I had the pleasure of listening to an articulate man speak in exactly the very same words. It's absolutely striking. His name is Robert Mugabe. So I would like to know how you expect to move on from where you are now in such a way that you do not end up creating the very same African story like the one that we are seeing in Zimbabwe, like the one that we have seen in Malawi, in Zambia, like the one that we have seen, indeed, in almost every other part of Africa?
Well, we are not going to do what the Zimbabweans have done, of dropping blood of innocent people. There is nothing wrong with Robert Mugabe's policy of land. There's everything wrong with the method used to attain the land. We cannot have people killed. We cannot have people injured because you want your land back. President Mugabe had more than 25 years to pass legislation through democratic means that will systematically take the land back into the rightful owners. He didn't do anything about it. He only introduced that policy at a time when he was losing power. It was opportunistic. It was not a real program that he believed in. Now, you ought to pass legislation through democratic means, parliament, in line with your constitution, which will take land back into the hands of the people. Already in South Africa, there are top judges who are saying, but what Malema says is already there. It is not put into test. Some are arguing that our legislature allows expropriation of land for as long as it is in the public interest and public purpose. But you've got a cowardice government which is not ready to expropriate land. I believe that through persuasion and exchanging of ideas and exposing the weaknesses of capitalist system in Africa, we will win what we are fighting for. If capitalism has worked here in the UK, let me tell you it has not worked in Africa. The system of capitalism is the one that produced poverty and unemployment in South Africa and the whole of Africa. There's never been any other system. Don't say socialism has failed in South Africa. It was never there. It has never been there. It has never been applied anywhere. If it failed in Soviet Union, not in Africa. Don't confuse Soviet Union with Africa. So it must be the whole blame must be put on the door of capitalism. The diseases you see, underdevelopment you see, the unemployment, the inequalities, joblessness is as a result of a capitalist system in Africa. It didn't work for us. It worked for you. You are very fortunate. We have been the unfortunate people who have been a subject of exploitation by a capitalist system. So, throughout, we are persuading people through dialogue and robust engagement and open and honest engagement. But dropping of blood is not what is on our table. At least for now. I don't know what will happen in future. But at least for now, there is no discussion about armed struggle. There is no discussion about killing anyone for the resources of Africa. We believe we can win them over through the power of persuasion.
Hello, yeah, I support your determination for self-determination, but I just want to remind you of something. You know, the ANC had a rule which they weren't going to break. It was in the Freedom Charter of 1956, which says that the resources of South Africa would be used for the people of South Africa. And, you know, and they were determined, the Freedom Charter, not to break this. But in 2002, I saw an interview with Nelson Mandela conducted by John Pilger. And his answer was, why have you broken that charter? And his reference was the fact that the precious resources of South Africa still remained in the hands of the very few white elite post-apartheid, to the extent that here in this country, Mrs. Thatcher's son moved to South Africa. Lady Diana Spencer's brother moved to South Africa because the tax rates were so favorable if you had wealth, at a time when the people in Soweto were still living in steel shuts without running water, as you quite rightly said. And when John Pilger asked him why he said this, his answer was really interesting. Nelson said, but I haven't cheated on that charter. You can now buy shares in these companies. Well, clearly, the people in Soweto can't buy shares. That massacre you mentioned in 2011, what you didn't say was that one of the shareholders was Cyril Ramaphosa. He used to be on the TV in this country every day, leading the ANC. Now he's one of the very wealthy guys who's getting Anglo shares, profits, he's rich. When he was asked, you shot people who were unarmed, he had nothing to say. I just want to say to you, and then I'm going to wrap this up quickly, my fear is that you're not addressing the issue. The issue is the reason we love Nelson Mandela is because he made a deal with the white elites, the power structures, the De Beers, the Oppenheimers, to remain in power, and he wouldn't touch their wealth, he wouldn't share their wealth, and that's why we in England love him, because the press tells us to. He betrayed the people of South Africa. And I'm frightened that unless you actually address the fact that the laws of South Africa doesn't make the corporations share the wealth as the Freedom Charter of 56 demands, my fear is nothing will change.
I think you captured it very well. There's no any better explanation than the explanation you have given. The deviation from the Freedom Charter was the beginning of selling out the revolution. But why did Nelson Mandela sell out the Freedom Charter? When Nelson Mandela returned from prison, he got separated with Winnie Mandela and went to stay in a house of the rich white men. He was looked after by the Oppenheimers. Nelson Mandela used to attend the club meetings of those white men who owned the South African economy at the time. He stayed in their complex. He stayed with them. He stayed in one of their houses. They had access to him 24 hours. And they told him that what he represents will not be achieved. And then that's when he turned against himself. Because the Nelson we are celebrating now is not the Nelson we celebrated before prison and during prison. It's a staged, managed Nelson Mandela who compromised the fundamental principles of the revolution, which are well captured in the Freedom Charter. The EFF subscribed to the Freedom Charter. The Freedom Charter has got a detailed explanation of how everything else is going to be achieved. The Freedom Charter is the Bible of the South African Revolution. Any deviation from that is a sellout position. So, unlike Nelson Mandela, we're doing what Nelson Mandela didn't do. We are happy he ushered in. We normally don't use those phrases like Mandela sold out and we are being too harsh, man. He was too old, he was tired. So he had to give in on some of the things. So he left it to us. We have to take it up where Madiba left it. And that's why Madiba said the struggle is not over. Madiba knew that there is an element of economic freedom that must be ushered in to complete the revolution. Madiba knew that political freedom is incomplete without economic freedom. So I wouldn't sit here and say Nelson sold out. I will say Nelson took us to a particular extent and then left it there for us to take it over. And we are here now. We don't say to Oppenheimer, this will happen, this will not happen. No. We come to Oxford University and the Oxford Union and tell you what we tell Africans and what we tell everybody everywhere. The message is the same. We want the total implementation of the Freedom Charter. Those kids who demand free education, they are demanding the implementation of the Freedom Charter. Those who say, let's share in the wealth of the country, they are demanding the implementation of the Freedom Charter. I said to you, when I started, we are just continuing with the legacy of great African leaders who came before us. We're not going to compromise like Madiba did. Perhaps it was necessary to have a cooling off period. We cooled off for far too long, 21 years. Now is the time to stand up and continue with the road towards economic freedom.
I'm afraid that's all we have time for this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please join me in thanking Julius Malema?